Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. I am your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I am joined by my indelible co-host, Dominic Orlando.
It's also the place where we praise the sun.
Yeah, we try to. As often as we can, weather permits, we try to praise the sun. Episode 229. Last week, we talked about, kind of was a catch-up episode, right, Dom? We talked about what we've been playing. We hadn't recorded in a while due to a lot of non-podcast stuff. This week, we're back to the normal grind, talking about video game news. Not a whole lot of stuff going on. The biggest developments here were the ID at Xbox showcase, which I really enjoy, and the Nintendo Indie World for August. Just a smorgasbord of indie games. It's kind of the trend for this year in general, Dom, as we've seen a lot of indie games come out with COVID affecting AAA game development. A lot of games have been delayed. A lot of games have been moved around. But finally, we're seeing a lot of indie stuff, which can be affected at the same level because it's smaller teams usually, but because they're smaller scoped games, they have a little bit more maneuverability than these giant tentpole releases. So I figured we'd get into a couple of things there, have some video game movie related news, which I thought was pretty funny. Other than that, pretty slow news week. I'm intrigued to see as the weeks come by. We're inching closer to Gamescom opening night live. That's going to be huge. I wonder what big announcements we're going to get there because it's the last big showcase before the Game Awards in December. So we'll see what happens there. The last big marketing push for games before the holiday rush. But let's get into it. First up, we have some Life is Strange news. Kind of a bummer a little bit, but it was announced that Life is Strange Remastered is getting delayed to early 2022. They penned an open letter, put it on social media, just talking about the struggles with development. But they did say that in its place, they're going to be releasing a DLC for Life is Strange True Colors called Wavelengths, which is going to be coming out at the end of September. So it kind of has a replacement there. Life is Strange Remastered was originally going to come out on the 20th. Instead, it's getting pushed to early 2022. We're getting Wavelengths DLC September 30th to follow the release of True Colors in early September. As somebody who hadn't played the original Life is Strange or its sequel, Dom, does this delay make you pause on maybe trying out True Colors until that remaster of the first couple of games comes out? Or like, what does this do for you as somebody who isn't as invested as I am?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's kind of a bummer. It's kind of like a missed opportunity because the typical template is, well, you put out your remastered collection of the old games half a year, some months before the new game comes out to get new people in who miss the originals and, drum up hype for the new one that you hope to sell even better. So this, putting out the remastered collection, some months after the newer game is not as intuitive. So yeah, someone like me, I'm like, well, not only I'm now going to wait until 2022 when the remastered collection does come out, because I don't want to buy the originals now, even though they go on sale so frequently. Knowing that there's remasters in the works, I would rather wait for them, right?
Yeah.
And certainly I'm not going to play True Colors before playing the remasters too. So it's like I'm like ready and willing to like buy these games, but just the timing is not ideal for for anybody, I guess.
And the interesting thing is, I do think there's some leeway there because it's not called Life is Strange 3, and it's not directly connected to Life is Strange and its prequel Before the Storm. But we've talked about, I think you'd get the most out of it if you played those two games first and then played this one to kind of see the lineage of the franchise. Okay. So yeah, they're not directly connected, but I do think for somebody who hasn't hopped in, with all of the games we're getting this fall, I think it's perfectly acceptable to pause on this, wait for the remastered games. If you absolutely fall in love, then get to True Colors. But who knows, because it isn't connected, if this game comes out and it scores tremendously high, there is that leeway there for you to make that case for yourself of, it's not a direct sequel, it's not connected narratively. There are obviously hints to the franchise, but it's not like a straight line from A to B. But yeah, okay. It is a bummer. I'm glad they were open about it, though. I'm glad they penned that letter. And on the plus side, they did replace it with something. So, for people who have played the first couple of games and maybe we're thinking about the remaster, but are fine without playing it, they still have something to look forward to. So at least there's that. There's a bit of a silver lining. 2021, man, this is the latest in the delays we were used to all year, so I'm not surprised. It's just, in a weird way, I would have liked True Colors to get delayed and have remastered still come out this year.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I get it because they're probably going to get better sales off of the new game as opposed to a remaster of the old games. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. A bit of a bummer, but totally acceptable. Next up, in a turn no one saw, the Sonic movie sequel. We knew that we were getting Knuckles because there were some teases of that. People were wondering, well, who's going to voice the character? It was announced. Idris Elba is going to be voicing Knuckles in the Sonic sequel. And this is pretty funny because on Twitter and social media in general, whenever there's a cartoon character that isn't openly a certain race, there's this really funny thing that goes on where certain racial groups claim them because they exude the energy that people feel their race exudes, right? So Black Twitter, for instance, was like, yo, this is perfect. We've been claiming Knuckles for years. Knuckles is black. So I thought that was really cool. And it's, it's nice to see that come to fruition, especially in terms of diversity, as we've talked about. No one's going to see the color of Idris Elba's skin, but in terms of inclusion and allowing people from different backgrounds to be a part of the film, yeah, who cares? If the casting director paid attention, this is actually smart. I wonder if part of the casting was finding a black voice because they understood that the fandom considered Knuckles black. I would love to know if that was the case, and I think that's pretty cool if it was. Because there is that weird thing with animation, right, where it's either an animal character or an alien or something, where they're written in a way to be relatable to people of different backgrounds. And it doesn't necessarily mean race all the time. Could be financial background, financial upbringing. It could be, whether you were raised in the suburbs or in the country. I just think that being able to include people that fans feel that character was written for is an awesome touch. How do you feel about Idris Elba playing Knuckles?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I'm having a hard time picturing it, but I'm very limited Sonic experience. But in that limited experience, like Knuckles' voice is like super super young, and sprightly, I guess. And maybe I'm wrong about this.
Maybe you're thinking of Tails.
Maybe that's where I'm mixed up. Because then in my head I'm like, I mean, Idris Elba is a great actor, but he has like a very low, like gravelly kind of voice.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was like, that's good for him. Hard for me to picture it. Maybe I just am also maybe not, understanding the extent of his voice acting knowledge. Maybe he can, he has like some crazy range I don't understand too. I don't know. But I think overall, like, so I think it's cool. Like, I was just thinking about him in The Office recently, and I love his character in that show too. But yeah, I think this is pretty cool that he got to voice Knuckles. I still haven't watched this first Sonic movie either, so I'm kind of out of the loop.
I need to watch it, man, because a lot of people said it was a lot better than it had any right being. And in terms of video game movies, it was a good movie, and removed from that, it also was a fun, like, family-friendly movie. So I'm excited to get around to watching it. It's I love Idris Elba. Like, he obviously recently was in the Suicide Squad. Excellent in that. If you haven't seen that film, watch it. It's on HBO Max if you're not comfortable, going to the theaters. But he's an awesome actor, and he has such a distinct voice too. And I wonder if that might cause some issues, because he's one of those people that when you hear him, it's like, oh, that's Idris Elba. Also unclear if he's going to be doing his actual accent because he is English, or if he's going with an Americanized voice.
Oh, I did not know that even.
Yeah. In The Office, does he have an American accent in The Office?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Honestly, I didn't even know he was in The Office until you just mentioned that. I'm not surprised that show has so many cameos.
Yeah.
It's cool though. Let's see who else they end up casting. I know people like Big the Cat. I wonder if he ever makes an appearance in the film franchise. He's that big old blue guy, or the pink one that people make very questionable art of on the internet, Rosie or whatever her name is. The whole Knuckles crew, man, that fandom is wild. They go a little crazy with them. Let's get into these two events that recently happened. We had the ID at Xbox event and the Nintendo Indie World, both showcasing indie games coming to their platforms. A lot of dope stuff. I want to see off the bat so no one gets their hopes up. No mention of a Fall Guys release date on Xbox, which is a bummer. No mention of Silksong in either show, which is a huge bummer. No mention of Cuphead DLC, which is a huge bummer. Just want to get those out of the way to begin with. Oh, and no Spelunky 2 date either for Xbox. But Spelunky 2 and 1 are coming to Nintendo Switch on August 26th. So that's really cool. Anyways, let's get into this idea at Xbox. This came by way of Xbox's official Twitch and YouTube stream. I kind of broke it down to everything that was covered that would be relevant to us, Dom. So first up, the section of things coming to Xbox Game Pass. We have Stardew Valley, which is coming in fall 2021. That's huge. Obviously, Stardew Valley, very popular indie game. Awesome that it's coming to Xbox Game Pass. That'll be the first time I play it, Dom. Never got around to it. And now it was one of those games that I'm like, if it goes on sale, I think I might just pick it up on the Switch or Xbox. Now that I know it's coming to Game Pass, I'm just going to wait. Evil Geniuses 2 is coming Q4 of 2021. Paparazzi is coming. It's a cute little indie game where you photograph dogs. Totally a dope indie game. Yeah, it's a Game Pass game that I tried because it's on Game Pass. Whereas Stardew Valley, I might eventually get around to. Paparazzi, download it. It's probably less than a gig download. Check it out, see what's up. This was announced at the Indie World for Nintendo, but it ended up happening also on Xbox. Boyfriend Dungeon shadow dropped on both the Nintendo Switch and Xbox Game Pass, which is pretty wild. Are you familiar with Boyfriend Dungeon, Dom?
No, but I've heard about it already at this point.
Yeah, so it's a dungeon crawler for those who don't know, and each weapon you acquire actually has the soul of a person. So it's the mix between a dungeon crawling roguelike and a dating sim. And the interesting thing to me is, you hear the name Boyfriend Dungeon, you assume it's whether you create a female or male character, that all of the weapons you run into are all male characters, right? Because it's Boyfriend Dungeon. Turns out there's actually female weapons in the game too, which is really cool. So it's open to, as in terms of a dating sim, it's open to anybody. If you're a woman into women, if you're a man into a man, if you're a straight dude who just thinks that the man sword that you got is dope and you want to develop a relationship because it makes the weapon stronger, it's just really cool. I think it's a neat concept. I already have it downloaded, Dom. I'm going to play it this week, and I'll report back to you next week to see how it is. I love roguelikes. Obviously, dating sims aren't my go-to genre, but the mix of this is so interesting, and watching gameplay of it, it looks fun. They have me. I'm going to at least try it. And that's the power of Xbox Game Pass. Do you have any interest in trying that game out?
No, literally none.
None?
But I appreciate some of the conversation and jokes I've seen about it, though.
It's a cool concept, man. I just like that people are willing to experiment. It's successful enough that it kind of warranted its development. Next up, we have a batch of games that are, some of them are being confirmed for Xbox for the first time. Some of them are getting updates. She Dreams Elsewhere is an RPG that people are really into with a distinct art style. Before this idea at Xbox, I think it was only listed for PlayStation and Nintendo. So it's good to see it's also coming to Xbox. The Wandering Village, Dom, this is an E3 game we talked about where it's a city sim builder on the back of that giant tortoise. Remember that game? Where they were like building a city on the back of that giant moving beast.
That looked cool.
I think it's going to enter early access by the end of this year. That's confirmed for Xbox. The Big Con, which is the 90s cartoon Doug inspired. It looks like a 2D adventure game. That's listed for August 31st. I believe that's launching in Xbox Game Pass as well. They announced the voice cast for it recently. It looks really fun. They did this thing where they had an open casting call for voices, Dom. So it was whether you were a professional voice actor in the industry or somebody who wanted to try to break into the industry for the first time, or maybe just a huge fan of the developer. They're like, hey, it's an open casting call. Send in your tapes. We're going to pick people. And the main character was a prominent voice actor, Erika Ashii, who's recently been in Apex Legends and Destiny 2. And she's kind of blowing up right now. And then some of the other characters were fans. And they did a pretty good job. It was really cool. Really interesting way to do a casting audition for roles.
It's kind of cool.
Next up, we had Ollie Ollie World, which is the third game in that franchise. They showed off some customization. It's coming winter of this year. And lastly, I would say the one that me and you are most likely to play, which is Loot River, which is the Tetris meets Souls-like, Dom. It's the one where it's the guy with the Plague Doctor mask, and he like moves the pillars, or sorry, not the pillars, the rafts on top of the water, and you manipulate the rafts and you move around, but it has Souls-like combat.
Oh, yeah. I remember this. You're right.
Yeah, and the enemies move really fast, and you can like manipulate the platforms to kind of get them stuck in a location.
Yeah.
No data on that, but they showed that off, so that's really cool. Overall, neat. If you're into indie games at all, I suggest go watching it. It was like an hour long, and it was like 20 plus games, Dom. Many of them I didn't mention here. Tons of different genres. ID at Xbox always does a fantastic job of showcasing what's coming to the platform, and it's cool to see a lot of these games we didn't know were coming finally officially labeled as such. Like I said before, bummer there was no Silksong, bummer there was no Spelunky 2, bummer Fall Guys still has no date. It was supposed to come out this summer, and then it got delayed, still no date on that, so at least there's some stuff to look forward to on top of, Hades, which is releasing the day after we're recording. Already have that pre-downloaded. Can't wait. The Artful Rally, it's like the cartoon top-down racing game that they showed off at E3, is also coming to Game Pass this week. And that's pretty much it for Xbox. Anything I mentioned there that interests you, Dom, or, you just, whatever?
Yeah, it was a lot of like, okay, that's cool, but to be honest, the paparazzi game, I'm kind of like, I might fuck with this. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm a big dog person, and I've been like, Animal Crossing didn't quite do it for me, so I've been kind of like craving something easygoing,
something wholesome. Yeah,
to putz around with, and that might just do it. I'm watching the trailer right now, and it's pretty hilarious and adorable.
This, speaking of games that you might want to relax with, this Nintendo Indie World we're about to get into had some really cool stuff that I think might be up your alley in that term as well. This happened in August as well, a couple of days ago, I think on the 11th. So here's a rundown of what was shown and or announced in terms of what's relevant to our podcast. First up, this one's huge, Dom. Loop Hero's coming to Switch, which I think is dope. Loop Hero is a game I talked about at the beginning of the year. It's a card-based RPG. It's a loop system. It's very much inspired by like Berserk, if you're familiar with that manga or anime, or obviously the World of Souls-like, which was inspired by Berserk. I think this is going to be huge for this game. Oftentimes, it's kind of like the Hollow Knight problem, Dom, where Hollow Knight came out on PC. It was kind of talked about but forgotten, and then once it came out on Switch, it had a second boom to it, which was really great. And I believe with Hollow Knight, it came out like in October of one year, and then it didn't come to Switch till like February of the following year, right?
It was a ways after, several months at least.
So with Loop Hero coming out early this year, they're able to still hit the same year and port it over, which is huge. And it's one of those things, Dom, I wonder if its success on PC aided it in being able to be ported, right? If it wasn't a hit, I wonder if it would ever made its way over to Switch. I'm excited to see more people play it, and I'm honestly curious if it might be the best way to play it on the Switch, because it's, I don't know, the UI for the game is super simple, and I think on the Switch there isn't, with most PC games it can get overly complicated, and how do you move from keyboard to controller? Whereas with Loop here, I think it's simplistic enough that Switch might end up being the preferred platform to play that game. And it gives me an excuse to hop back in, because I've wanted to hop back into Loop Hero for some time. No confirmed date yet, just 2021. Hopefully it hits that, but in the world of COVID in 2021, you never know. This one was shocking, Dom. We got a brand new Shovel Knight game announced.
Mm-hmm.
We got Shovel Knight Pocket Edition, which is a puzzle dungeon crawler. If you're into these type of games, pretty much like a Match 3 Candy Crush type game mixed with a dungeon crawler. I don't know if it's for me, despite me being a huge Shovel Knight fan. It comes down honestly to price on this, Dom. If it's cheap enough, I'm going to pick it up to check it out. I'm thirsting for Shovel Knight. Somebody who, like you, who liked Shovel Knight as well, what does it do for you?
I was more hoping the next Shovel Knight game, but proper. But if this is isn't this going to be a mobile game too, or I might be mixing
it was original. We already knew it was a mobile game. It coming to Switch is the announcement here.
Okay, all right, that's what I'm mixed up. Okay, so yeah, I guess if it's something cheap and there's some good reviews type of thing, maybe I'll take a look. But otherwise, that's not really my genre. Even though I did appreciate the original Shovel Knight and everything it was doing there, but this is just a little too different.
The good thing is this coming out means that they're probably going to put their most of their focus on the next actual big game that's coming out, because we already knew this was coming out to mobile, so I doubt porting it to Switch is a huge thing. Honestly, it's probably smart in terms of business because it has that built-in fan base on the Switch, and now they can just move forward. They've been so locked into those Kickstarter rewards, and it's one of those things of I commend them for being loyal to everyone and making sure all of those things got out the door. But then remember, all the DLC things kind of ballooned into their own standalone campaigns, and it kind of kept going and going. And, I doubt Yacht Club Games is mad about the success of that whole thing. But I do think from a creative standpoint, if they're a little burned out and maybe they're Yeah, we probably want to work on Shovel Knight something next, but let's just try a different genre and get something out there, something simple. Especially knowing instead of creating an IP from scratch for a mobile game, right, Dom? They have this IP. Let's just mold this into something. It's a lot easier on the creative brain. Who knows? I'm just glad that they're hopefully moving on to their next thing, whether it's Shovel Knight 2 or something dope that we'll be excited for in the years to come. Speaking of dope things that are coming out, we have a trio of games that are coming to Switch. This is the announcement here are the ports. So we have Tetris Effect, pretty familiar, recently came to Xbox. We have Metal Slug Tactics, which is a tactics game based on the Metal Slug franchise. That's slated for 2022. We didn't have platforms yet. Knowing the Switch is confirmed is awesome. Metal Slug and Switch go together like peanut butter and jelly. And lastly, this is another game that falls into that wholesome category for you, Dom. Toem. Now, you might not recognize the name, but this was the black and white photography game that we saw at E3 as well, where you play as like this little bird creature, and it's all about perspective. So it's basically like Fez, but instead of platforming, it's about photography. So you're manipulating your perspective on the level and getting different pictures. Seems very simple, very cute, very adorable. I think it fits in that mold. We were talking about paparazzi, where it's probably just going to be a simple, fun time with very, heartwarming music. I'm glad it's coming to Switch. I probably am going to want to play it on Xbox for the achievements, but I'm just glad it's getting ported places.
Yeah, that's interesting. That sounds a lot like I played a game called Monument Valley. I don't know if I guess it's kind of popular, but mostly on mobile. I don't think it might have came to consoles, but it was, a puzzle game where the shtick was like changing your perspective, changes the way things look and behave in a literal sense, which is kind of cool. And once your brain gets used to doing that, it's just, I don't know, it's a lot of fun. It's super satisfying. So that's kind of what this sounds like. I'm curious now.
Now, I'm excited about this one because this is a game I drafted in our fantasy league, and I almost guarantee you that you and Chris were like, why is he drafting this game? What the hell is this game? Who knows what this game is? And honestly, it was a risk because just like Silk Song and Cuphead DLC, I didn't know if this game was coming out this year. But in my heart, I believed that this game is going to come out and review very well and be a very good game. This is from Cuttlefish, who are the publishers of Stardew Valley, among a lot of other games. And that's Eastward. Now, Eastward is a gorgeous pixel art, Earthbound-inspired RPG. It looks incredible. Like, Earthbound in many ways are Japanese developers making a game set in American society, right? If you've ever seen Earthbound, it's a baseball kid wearing a striped shirt, all that stuff. This is like, Earthbound if it was Japanese inspired. It looks gorgeous. The crazy thing here is not only is it going to be a launch exclusive for the Nintendo Switch, which is perfect for that game, it's coming out next month, Dom. It's coming out September 16th. This is a game that went from me not being sure if it was going to come out this year to coming out in a month, and I cannot wait. This is one of my most anticipated games, especially with all the other indie games I'm hyped for not being seen anywhere. I think this has a chance to be up there with the Death's Doors and these other indie titles for Game of the Year. I think it has that potential, and who knows, it might not meet that, but art style and like gameplay setup alone, I'm super, super excited.
Yeah, I had no idea what it was until you first pointed it out. But then even more recently, I've started to see it get some more coverage. So I've watched a little bit of gameplay and stuff. And yeah, it looks so dope. I'm probably going to be in right when this comes out because it looks fantastic. And then, yeah, that's pretty soon. So I was pretty hyped on this too. I'm really happy with the variety of art styles and settings and styles, that, you know what I mean? It seems like we've just been getting a great variety of all that stuff. It doesn't always work, it doesn't always hit, but I just really appreciate how creative developers seem to be getting, it seems, in the past couple of years. And maybe it's just mine becoming more aware, but in my opinion, it feels like devs are getting more creative and doing more cool stuff like it that really sticks. Like you mentioned, Cuphead was obviously one. But yeah, this game has its own cool aesthetic that something about it just feels like, I don't know, just kind of cool.
I think also we're transitioning to a place where, not including the casual Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA gamer, because they're their own kind of pocket, but the second tier there, I would say we're enthusiasts, right? The tier right below us, but between us and the Madden casuals, I think they have warmed up over the last 2 generations to the idea of buying and playing indie games. Because even if you go back to the 360 era when we had the Indie Live Arcade and you had the Limbos and the uh, Castle Crashers, right? Enthusiasts were hyped about that game, and some of the that middle tier of gamer were getting into it, but it still has been a slow process of people warming up and understanding that these games have value, and it's not just the AAA blockbusters that are worth buying. And I think we're finally coming into our own where games like Eastward, hopefully, or Death's Door, which is confirmed, we know how it's done performance wise. Once these games are critically well received and people enjoy them and they get to see these games being played on Twitch, they're like, I'm gonna hop in. And with the diversity of art styles, it's like, this game doesn't really look like anything I've played, and it's a good game. That gets me excited. How many times have I been on the podcast and I'm excited purely based on the art style of a game, and I'm like, yeah, the gameplay looks kind of rudimentary or nothing like captivating at all, but the art style has me to at least try it, because it is so unique. And man, if you have some good music and some good art style, I'll look over some redundant gameplay. I best believe.
Man, speaking of, you asked me last week about Hyper Light Drifter, and I have to take this, not very substantial segue, but great music in that game as well. I'll recommend that every chance I get, even if it's not a real chance, and I'll just plug it anyway. But super cool music in that one, and art, and a cool art style too.
That's one thing with Death's Door that I think I didn't touch on either. I think it has really good music too. It very Zelda inspired. Like sometimes going through some of those levels, I feel like I was playing like Link Between Worlds or something. Next up, the last 2 announcements here. First up, Axiom Verge 2 Shadow dropped, which is pretty crazy. People have been wondering, is this game going to continuously get delayed forever? It dropped out of nowhere. Everyone has their own gamer shame pile of backlog. I never got around to the first Axiom Verge. I don't know if you did, Dom.
No, me either.
So I'm excited to eventually get to this, but I still feel I owe the first game the respect to play that first because it did do so well critically. And it was only developed by one person, right? I don't know if the second one is, but I'm pretty sure the first game was only developed by one individual, which is always impressive, especially when they're critically acclaimed the way they are. And lastly, kind of touched on this one, Boyfriend Dungeon Shadow dropped, on the Nintendo Switch, but also on Game Pass. Garden Story Shadow dropped, and Slime Rancher Shadow dropped. Now, Slime Rancher, you would think, oh, it's a very cutesy indie game, Jerrad. Why are you even bringing it up? It's like, yeah, of course it's going to be on Switch. I don't know if you've ever seen Slime Rancher, Dom, but it seems more performance intensive than you would assume like a wholesome indie game like that would, because there's so many slimes on screen at any given time and they're moving independently of one another. I'm curious to see how that performs on the Switch in terms of just graphical and frames per second performance, I don't know if the Switch can handle it necessarily, which is odd to say, but Doom is on the Switch, but in what capacity and what quality, right? Slime Rancher, I don't know how it's going to run, because I think far too often we think about performance in terms of, oh, this game is trying to run in 4K, it's probably going to be harder. But you'll often find sometimes with games like this where there's so many individual assets on screen at a given time and they're all moving independently that can freak out a system. Especially with this. With Slime Rancher, Dom, for context, you can have, in the starting area, you can have 8 giant pens for slimes, and each of those comfortably can hold 20 to 35 slimes. Just put that into context. So if you're walking through that area, right, collecting stuff, that's a lot of individual moving parts. I'm just curious to see how it's going to run performance-wise. Doubt it's going to get the Digital Foundry treatment. It's not necessarily on that scale, but I wonder if somebody's going to take a look at it and wonder how it's running. That's pretty much it. Oh, sorry.
There's definitely like that element that we sometimes overlook as far as what hardware can do what, right? There's it's super high resolution, tons of textures, really, graphic detail kind of stuff. All the GPU intensive, traits. And then we don't kind of forget that, some games might not be super detailed appearance wise, but maybe a ton of stuff going on. So that sounds like an example like that. Or I always think of Control, where that is all actually happens to be also a very pretty game, but more than that, there's like all sorts of particles and stuff is getting thrown through the air like really fast and everything. There's just a lot going on. So yeah, it's something else to think about when you're like, oh, how would this be on the Switch? Because like Doom, yeah, very fast paced and very good looking, but mostly linear, kind of like smaller level, first person shooter. So like, can see where it's more possible. Maybe not the most enjoyable place to play it, but yeah.
Well, and then you think about something like Breath of the Wild, where, my biggest complaint on it is that the world felt empty. But I wonder if that was a design constraint where, in order to have that dope physics-based system that they had in that game, right, where things interact in wildly possible ways, that the shortcoming of it was we need to space out these things in a way where the system can handle it, right? And it kind of opens it up to where there isn't a whole lot going on in a section of active gameplay at any given time. And you can kind of supplement that with the physics-based gameplay and the way things interact. So that's stuff that you have to think about too, because if it was a densely populated open world, I don't know if it would have ran the way it ran. You know what I mean? And not that it ran perfectly. I'm one of the minority people, that points out the emptiness of the world. The biggest complaint with Breath of the Wild was pretty much the performance not always being exceptional in terms of frames per second and stuff like that. So even at that, even though they did make some choices, it didn't, go squeaky clean by the time it released. And Nintendo's quality control is better than almost any other companies. Like, they don't release stuff until it's good to go. So the fact that it was even had some of those issues was surprising. But I do think it's because, open world game for the first time for Legend of Zelda. But that was a dope presentation for both Xbox and Nintendo. Nothing else really of note. In terms of what we've been playing, nothing of note for me. I think next week I'll have more to say because I'll have Boyfriend Dungeon Dom, I'll have Hades, and the Madden. Madden does like the trial every year where you get to play for like 10 hours if you have EA Play before the game comes out. Since EA Play is a part of Game Pass now, I don't even have to pay for EA Play, so I just had access to that. So I downloaded that, so I'll have probably some impressions for all of those. Mostly for Hades and Boyfriend Dungeon. Madden, I probably won't have much to say. It's Madden.
It's football.
Exactly. Other than that, nothing else of note. I'm trying to run through my head. Playing some of the new Apex Legends season, Dom. The new legend is really cool. His name's Seer. So there's classes in the game, and there was only one tracker in the game before him. And that class is just about gathering information, right? So being able to know where other players are, being able to be sneaky and stealth. Seer's abilities are he can throw out this tunnel of vision straight ahead of him for quite a ways. And if anybody's in that tunnel when he activates it, they get spotted so you know where they are, but also they get silenced for a couple of seconds so they can't use any abilities. So that's pretty powerful. His passive ability is anytime he aims down the sights on his gun, he has a built-in heartbeat sensor. So if anybody's within 75 meters of you, it has an arrow on the actual reticle of the gun in the direction where they are. So it's like very good information gathering. It's kind of overpowered, honestly. And then his ultimate, he drops down this dome where if anybody's moving fast in it or is shooting, they automatically pop up on your screen of where they are. So if you mix that with his ability to shoot that tunnel, you can both find out where active players are or campers. Like if somebody's hiding in a corner, because if they're hiding, you just point out your gun, you aim, you see that they're in this direction, you splash your tunnel, or if they're running around, you just do your dome. So he's very effective in close quarters, and I'm having a blast with him. His design, if you want to Google it real quick, is dope. His name's Seer, Seer. He looks straight out of... are you familiar with Afrofuturism, Dom? That design philosophy? It's basically Wakanda in the MCU. So it's a mix of future tech. It's Afrofuturism. It's like, he looks dope. He has like the Raiden hat. Yeah, his design is so cool.
Fuck.
He moves very much in like a weird way, like very smooth and like Baracho from Mortal Kombat. It's hard to describe. Very like witch doctor-y, like voodoo-y, like very smooth and like a worm kind of.
He's got a whole profile. He's 26 years old. His real name is Obi Andolasim. Probably said that wrong, but kind of cool. Got a whole profile on this guy at the Apex's website out here.
Their lore is very good, man, for the characters, and he's just really cool. And that's the power of that game. Is I haven't played that game in a couple of months, and they announced this new character, and I'm like, am I gonna like him? Is he gonna be good? And I hop in, and I have a blast with him. He's my main now, Dom. Like, he's my main character, and that's pretty impressive. I'm having a blast with it. I don't know how familiar you are, but with everything happening with Call of Duty right now, between the stuff with Activision Blizzard, but also the state of the game with hackers, a lot of the major streamers, Dom, are moving off of Call of Duty, Warzone, and playing Apex. So it's like booming right now. You have people like Nick Merckx, who typically, Dom, on an average day, he has 50,000 people in his Twitch chat watching him play Call of Duty. But for the last 2 weeks, he's been playing Apex and his numbers didn't go down. And they're just tired of, that company not doing stuff with the game and fixing it. And they're kind of are like, hey, if you're not going to fix it, we're not going to continue giving you free promo. So Apex is in a good place right now, and it deserves it because, as we talk about, Respawn, chef's kiss, top of the industry, up there with From Software and Naughty Dog and these titans of the industry. But that's it for me. Like I said, I'll have more to talk about in terms of games next week. You have anything to note?
I don't think I even can add anything. I've been working more than usual the past week, so the only thing, I've put a little bit of time into Fallout 4, which was kind of by default.
Yeah.
I haven't had my PC available at as much as in the past, which is where I have Death's Door still halfway done. So I want to finish up Death's Door, but in the meantime, I was just laying back on the couch, found myself playing Fallout 4 for some reason. And it's like, it's getting to be an old game at this point. I'll say I still love it, but yeah.
Was that 2015, right?
Yeah. Runs great on PS5 though, which I would expect. I would expect
really,
it to run
with
even
Xbox
better.
owning Bethesda? I'm obviously just being a troll.
I wonder if that's one that I would think at a minimum it got like a performance boost on Series X, how a lot of games got them, without needing a patch. I wonder if that's one of those.
And it got the FPS boost, which actually took a little bit of work. It got both of them.
Okay, sweet. So yeah, that makes sense then. So that's probably even better place to play. But yeah, I've debated on grabbing that platinum because I never finished that game like fully, like every single different quest line you can do because there's different endings and all that kind of stuff.
I never touched any of the DLC, man. I'm kind of bummed about that.
Oh yeah, and that DLC is pretty good. It's a lot of it's better than the base game, for sure.
Bethesda nails Fallout DLC pretty handedly. I mean, even in the Elder Scrolls series, they do too. That's why I'm excited to see what the hell Starfield's DLC is going to be, because it's their first major sci-fi game like that. Pretty exciting stuff. One thing I wanted to mention, and I'm going to talk about football for less than a minute, so please stick with me, listeners, if you're not in sports. Dom, the typical thing with fantasy football, like say for instance, you have Aaron Rodgers. Say you're a Packers fan, right? And you're playing me, and I have Aaron Rodgers. Now, in terms of a football fan, you want Aaron Rodgers to go off, and you want the Packers to win because you're a Packers fan, right? But if we're playing in fantasy, you're going to be kind of pissed off if Rodgers goes off because it's probably going to mean you're losing that week in fantasy football, correct? That's kind of a weird thing. We're going to have that for the first time, I think, in our fantasy game thing, Critics League, because you counterpicked Eastward.
I did.
Wow,
yeah. Wow.
So it's a game you're looking forward to, and who knows, you might love it and enjoy it a lot, but you counterpicked it. So, it's one of those things.
But I hope it's shit so that I can win our fantasy league.
Yeah. At least there's no money on the line or anything. That'd be a whole different conversation. But
yeah.
And I honestly think it was just out of ignorance to the game, right? Because our drafts, I think, in general, were pretty good. And it's like I counterpicked Deathloop, and I'm worried I'm going to kind of get boned with that because, Deathloop could be a great game. And I think Eastward might be that for you, or like it might come out and get really good scores. But that's, the game you play. It's either you pick a game you don't think is releasing, or you pick a game you know the least about, or you think is not going to be good. So that's it for this week's show. Hopefully, we have a bunch of stuff to talk about next week. That's the one bummer too, Dom, is like in an alternate reality, this is our job, right? We have thousands, millions of listeners, and we get to play whatever we want each week because it is our job. But the reality situation, it isn't, so we try to get gaming in as much as we can. But at least at the end of the day, we have the news to talk about when there is news. I'm trying to think, is there anything... When does 12 Minutes come out? Is that next week, or is that after the podcast?
I mean, I feel like it's August for sure, right? So it's...
Before we close the show, guys, let me look at the release dates real quick, because I'm unsure.
Got you.
Oh, Dom, I have my own personal spreadsheet. I'm a lunatic. The 19th. So yeah, it'd be after the podcast. No, well, I think it's the day of the podcast. I don't know if I'd have time to play it then. Dang, yeah. Next week's a crazy week. So I have Hades. We have Row 96. Do you remember that game? The indie game?
Yes.
It's like
yes.
the RPG where you make decisions. That's the 16th. 12 Minutes the 19th. Madden 22 the 20th. Kena the 24th. Psychonauts 2 the 25th. No More Heroes the 27th. We kind of went over this last week. It's just, we talk about like October, November being huge for games, but August, man, power player this year. Pretty huge. Anything else you want to end to close the show down before I get into our whole rigmarole?
No, you're right though. It's like it's indie season. Like
Indie season, baby.
Coming out this summer. Yeah.
They need to brand that indie season. Yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Follow us on YouTube, Controlled Interest. You can follow the podcast there in video form. On Twitter, you can follow us individually. I'm Jerrad Wyche, JerradWyche. Dom is Obi-Dom Kenobi, but the
That's right.
O in Obi is the actual number 0. Correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to remember it. Dom's Oreo's much easier to remember, Dom. You threw me for a loop, but I do like Obi-Dom Kenobi. Really good. Fits here, obviously, passion for Star Wars. Collectively, CTRL-INT is Controlled Interest abbreviated. If you just want the audio, we're on all podcast services. I would suggest Spotify. It's the easiest one to use. It's the one I use. But we're also on iTunes and all of that stuff as well. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week with game impressions for the latest releases and maybe some interesting news. Can't promise it, though. I don't control the industry. See you guys then. Bye.